Coming up,
Keep Anchorage fair.
Proposition 1 and the battle over bathrooms based on your sex at birth.
A yes on one vote simply returns freedom, choice, and common sense.
Proposition 1 would put me in danger of putting me into a restroom I don't belong.
How the debate has become more than just about bathrooms.
It would just be another self-inflicted blow, if you will, to our own economy.
Why some say this election could be a teachable moment for Anchorage.
To get beyond the bathroom, we have to learn to see people as people.
I never really had a daughter. I thought I did.
Ahead, one family's journey, what they've learned along the way.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers. Anchorage thought the battle over the bathrooms was settled when the Assembly passed a law 3 years ago that barred discrimination over sexual orientation and gender identity. Then came Proposition 1, an initiative voters will consider this April. It seeks to regulate public bathrooms and intimate spaces such as locker rooms based on your sex at birth rather than the gender that you identify with, a debate that clearly has gone beyond the bathroom.
Do you know where to return your ballot or vote in person? You know, ask them those sorts of questions.
In the battle against Ballot Measure 1, Lillian Lennon helps volunteers work the phones. But for her, it's a very personal fight.
I grew up and was raised, you know, as a boy, but quickly realized that that's not really who I was. That I'm, you know, really Lillian. I'm really a woman.
It's a journey Lillian Lennon says hasn't been easy. From her family's initial rejection to persecution from strangers.
Proposition 1 would put me in danger of putting me into a restroom I don't belong and put me in potential danger for harassment.
The sponsors of the initiative to restrict the use of public bathrooms and locker rooms based on gender at birth say it's a fight for the rights of all.
It's about the lack of boundaries, it's about the lack of freedom, and about the lack of privacy for everybody.
Again, we go back to science and biology.
At a recent debate, Proposition 1 supporters aired their frustrations.
That makes me, as a mother, uncomfortable to see another man enter this restroom when he is clearly biologically a man.
I'm not saying that people are going to come in and hurt me, but I have the right, and my children and my grandchildren have the right to have the right to privacy.
The Alaska Republican Party has also come out in support of Prop 1.
When the Assembly stepped in and tried to fix a problem that didn't exist, they created more of a problem. And that's exactly what Proposition 1 is trying to do, is trying to undo the problem.
But Anchorage business leaders say there is no problem.
Businesses looking at communities to invest in do their homework.
In fact, they say the passage of Prop 1 could set the city back in its efforts to build a workforce.
I think that Proposition 1 doesn't fit within the context of what Anchorage is, which is a young community.
That's why the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation's board voted to oppose the initiative.
We believe that the backlash that will come from it will definitely hurt our economy and our community.
The Anchorage Chamber and the Visitors Bureau also opposes the measure.
Each of us is made in the image of God and deserves compassion and love.
As well as a large coalition of church leaders.
Transgender people are a part of the community.
Lillian Lennon says backing from these groups means a lot to her.
It's going to affect people like me. It's going to affect, you know, a lot of people I care about.
Do you have a minute to talk about Proposition 1?
She says the volunteers who have turned out to fight Prop 1 have made her feel accepted.
I just love the strength and the passion that's come through this journey. That's good. That's awesome. That's what we want to hear.
A journey that will never really be over. We invited Jim Minery, one of the sponsors of Prop 1, to be a part of this program, but he did not respond to our phone calls. Coming up, beyond the bathroom and into one family's living room.
The first thing you want to do is focus on your child, you know, and loving your child, being present for your child, recognizing that this was not an easy thing for him to say to us.
What happened when John and Cathy Gillis learned their baby girl had grown up to be a boy? For the moment, let's set aside the debate over Proposition 1 and look at what it means to be a transgender person, something the Gillis family says most of us don't understand.
Good boy, come on.
If there's one thing C.J. Gillis knows,
Chaco, bring it here.
Practice, patience, and discipline.
Good boy.
Pay off.
Can you sit? Wait. Okay.
Much in the way he's helped Chaco realize his potential, CJ has worked hard to do the same for himself.
Come on.
I don't have any models to draw, so I draw myself. It's a self-portrait, actually.
He began work on it about a year ago.
My determination to stay true to myself came through in sort of a literal way.
Through his art, CJ explored how the lines of a man are so much different than a woman's.
Okay, so we're almost ready.
It was 4 years ago his parents discovered the baby girl they brought into the world really wanted to be a boy.
So how's that mural coming?
Good, it's almost done.
CJ's brother Riley found it easy to accept, more so than his parents who worried this was just a phase. But at 14, CJ embraced his maleness and never let go.
Come on, wait.
And with the same patience he used to teach Chaco to flip treats off his nose,
Good boy.
CJ trained his parents to change their thinking.
Good job, Chaco.
It's now a house united, and this poster says it all.
When he said he wanted male pronouns, I thought it was sort of interesting, and it didn't make any sense to me.
When CJ first told you that he is not your daughter but your son, how did you react?
I think I said, okay, sort of reeling in private afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. Just saying, okay, you know, here's a brand new direction that we didn't even know we might take as parents, and here it is.
It's a weird realization for me too, honestly.
When did you decide enough is enough, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy?
I didn't know what exactly was different about me, but I knew that it was something.
At 13, CJ finally understood what that something was after he read books about the transgender experience. Prior to that, did you feel very alone, very isolated?
Definitely. Around 10, even 9 to 14, I was really troubled by really severe depression, anxiety issues. When it finally clicks and you realize this is who I am, you'll realize that you've known it all your life without knowing exactly how to say it.
Everything clicked into place for CJ's parents when he suddenly became a happier person.
A lot of transgender youth experience depression and anxiety, but it is not because they're transgender. It has more to do with living in a society that isn't prepared for them or doesn't know how to relate to them.
And that's the problem. The transgender experience is complicated.
I consider myself gay for the most part.
Which bathroom do you use?
I use the men's bathroom. I think that if I used the women's bathroom, there would be all sorts of protests.
To get beyond the bathroom, we need to build our willingness to understand each other and to have compassion for people who are different from ourselves.
What do you feel after 4 years?
It's a sort of a sense of wonder, I think, you know, every day, watching things unfold.
So what do you think of your son?
Oh, I love him. He's a fantastic person. He's expressive, he's kind, he's creative, he's fierce, he's strong. And I'm just excited to watch him grow up into the man that he's destined to become.
An incredible strength has emerged from rallying around our child and watching him be fully, authentically who he is.
I mean, I'm also a religious person, and the way I see it is, if God created me always feeling male, even though I was born in a female body, how could God be wrong about that either? Being able to live true to myself has really changed me for the better in a huge way, and I'm so much happier than I used to be.
And CJ hopes that his story will help others find their truth. CJ is a senior at the Polaris school and will turn 18 in May. He has a couple of dreams, one to go to art school and the second to join a circus performance troupe, and that's why he spends a lot of time working out in the gym to train for strength and endurance. Well, just ahead, our discussion about the transgender experience continues with two parents who are here to share what they've learned from their kids. For better or for worse, Proposition 1 has brought the spotlight to people who identify themselves as transgender. Joining us now, Cathy Gillis, who we introduced you to in our last segment, CJ's mom. We also have David Lockard joining us. He also has a transgender son named Cole. Now, since we got to know CJ, I'd like to spend a little time getting to know Cole. Tell us about him.
Cole's an 18-year-old teen going to East High School. He's a senior. He's taking 4 AP advanced placement classes and loves to play with the dog and hang out with his little sister and go on family adventures. We like to travel a lot.
When did he tell you that he was not your daughter but your son?
That was 3 years ago when he was 15.
And so we see him there about how old?
That's a good question. I'm guessing 5, 6.
5. And it's hard to tell from these early pictures. He could be either a boy or a girl. A lot of kids, it's hard to tell. There you are as a family. How did you react?
To him coming out? Well, the first strong feeling was fear, because I know the LGBTQ community is at higher risk of assault and other difficulties in our society. And
there he is looking totally confident.
Yeah, that was on a hike. I think that's Flat Top, actually. So it was fear, but also an awareness that I didn't know what it meant to be transgender when he told us that's what he is. And so my wife and I, learned a lot right away, as fast as we could.
Did you, both of you, did you feel some initial shame or embarrassment?
I wouldn't say shame. I've never been ashamed of my family or my children, but I was uncomfortable. I didn't know what to think, and I was really afraid. I was afraid of what it meant for our family and what it meant to be part of a wider world.
A lot of parents, though, kind of think of their kids as a reflection of them, and so if they don't match up to my expectations. How about you?
Not at all. I'm very proud of both of my kids, and Cole, my transgender son, is one of the most wonderful people I know. He's kind and thoughtful, he's intelligent, he's hardworking.
What's his dream?
I think he's drawn in 2 directions. One is civil rights and the rights of, particularly of people in the transgender community. The other is science. He's very interested in genetics. He's also interested in climate change and ocean acidification.
Now, did you ever at any point, though, say, look, we can fix this? We can get these kids back to their proper genders?
No. No, I never said that. I think what I did is I dove into research. I read a lot, everything I could get my hands on, and I reached out to the community to find out what do we know about what it means to be transgender, and how do I raise a child to be safe and healthy and a participating member of society with this mix thrown into the mix now. No, I never tried to fix him. He's fine the way he is.
Well, you know, this notion of proper gender, you know, is your birth identity. Mm-hmm. What have you seen as the fallout from trying to force somebody to conform to that birth gender?
When people are not validated, when they express their gender identity, and that's being very true to who they are and who they feel themselves to be inside their internal sense of self, if that's not validated, there are lots of studies to show a very high rate of suicide attempts, suicidal ideation.
Well, let's take a look at some numbers. We have some numbers from a national survey, and it shows that 29% of transgender people surveyed in 2015 said they were living in poverty, 30% reported being homeless, 40% reported suicide attempts during their lifetime. Those are pretty staggering numbers. They don't look good.
Right, and they're not good. And I think that the marginalization of the transgender community overall makes those statistics so much higher than those same statistics for the general population.
So David, do you think these statistics ring true to you?
Oh, absolutely.
How so?
Well, in the 3 years since our son came out, we have come to know many people in the transgender community and their parents in Anchorage, and we've met some wonderful parents. But what we found is that when children are not accepted and respected by their parents, children who are transgender, they have a very difficult road ahead of them. And
what happens to them?
Well, the risk of suicide and the risk of being homeless are much, much higher. The risk of persecution, discrimination, and also financial difficulties. All of those things are higher.
Do they get kicked out of home sometimes?
Yeah, they do.
That my wife and I actually heard about that through our son. One of his friends came out to his parents as transgender and was kicked out of the house. This was a teenager about the age of 15. My son asked us if we could take him into our house. And as we were gathering information and thinking about that, we heard that he was taken in by another group and supported, and eventually he went back to his parents. And to me, that's telling, because it means to me that even though his parents had a lot of difficulty initially accepting the fact that he's transgender, they eventually decided that they were going to take care of their child. That's really important.
Well, one of the things that your son talked about, and we didn't have a chance to get into it in our story, is, you know, he says he feels very lucky that his family has the financial resources to help him get hormone treatments and realize that dream of fully becoming a man. You know, how important is that people get the help they need to align with what they feel is their true gender?
I think it's important, and it's different for every person. So there are people who really need those medical interventions. And for those individuals, it's critical for the medical community to be able to assist them. There are other people who are not as uncomfortable, who don't necessarily want to engage in medical treatment. So it's really an individual choice or case-by-case basis.
So I want to ask you, what bothers you the most about how society as a whole perceives the transgender community?
Well, my thinking is evolving over time, and one of the things that's really struck me recently is that there are a lot of different groups that have been discriminated against historically in our country. Native Americans, African Americans, women, and then a lot of subgroups as well, but the people in the lesbian and gay community. And it seems to me that as those groups have gotten protections in the law and also have gotten more respect from the general public, the discrimination against them, it's been harder to do, to discriminate. And so now there's a new group. It's the transgender community. It's easy to discriminate against them because they're a very small group, they're misunderstood, they don't have a strong history of fighting back. And
well, actually, they probably, for their own privacy, probably don't let everybody know that they're trying to pass as another gender in some cases. I imagine that. So this is actually kind of, in some ways, very brave that your children are willing to just come out and be public about it.
It takes a lot of courage to come out, and I think that people, as I mentioned before, that it's an individual truth for people. The idea of someone having to pass in order to be respected as a human being is what I have a really hard time with. You know, our bodies...
But it sounds like your son, he wants to pass. It's very important to him to have the male body, for people to not even question.
Well, it's yes and no. I think for his sense of self, he takes really good care of himself and he feels male and wants to project that. However, he's also been very courageous in sharing his story, which outs him to the general public. And so I would say, you know, if you think about someone's desire to blend in or to be undetectable, his actions haven't supported that as much. But yeah, he likes being male and he likes to be a good-looking male. And actually, I don't know of any 17 or 18-year-old who wouldn't want to be a good-looking teenager. So,
so that's the common thread there. David, how do you feel about that? That, you know, kind of the pressures on the transgender population to blend in, and the fact that they, you know, that may be why they don't really talk about it, keep it secret.
Yeah. Well, I'm hesitant to say too much about being transgender because I'm not, obviously. But actually, I think I would echo something Cathy said earlier, which is that each transgender person is an individual and they have different perspectives on it. Some of them want to pass and it's very important to them. Others are very proud to be transgender, whether they're a transgender man or woman.
I think where people get confused too is the difference between your gender identity and your sexual orientation. Like your son told me that he aligns himself as being gay, although he is a girl who became a boy. Yeah. So these are confusing things to take in.
It is confusing. It is confusing. And it's important to realize just the very basic things about gender identity versus sexual orientation to kind of try to wrap your head around what that really means. So sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. And gender identity is who you are as a person inside, your femaleness or your maleness or somewhere in between that. It's easy to look at someone like me, for example, and say, oh, you know, there's a female and I wonder what her husband looks like. You know, we make assumptions based on external appearances all the time. It's human nature. So I think that being able to understand that you can't detect someone's gender simply by looking at them is a key component, and that gender and sexual orientation are different things and don't necessarily match each other the way we might expect.
David, last word here. What's the best advice you can give us on this subject?
Well, I think the thing that seems most obvious to me is that if a parent has a child who comes to them and says, I'm transgender, as a father or a mother, the best thing we can do for our kids is to accept them, respect them, and protect them.
All right, well, I want to thank both of you for joining us and sharing your insights. Well, we have some final thoughts on C.J. Gillis's art. Like C.J., it's a work in progress. He says he's capable of all styles of art, but during his search for identity, he turned increasingly to fantasy to cope, and says his paintings and drawings reflect this period. Well, we want to leave you now with a look at some of that work. We'll see you next week.